Bonjour, bonjour tout le monde. Just a note, I will be presenting mainly in English for logistical reasons. However, I can send either to the organizers or to any individuals here, I can send a French version of the presentation. When I was preparing for this presentation, there was a specific memory that came to mind of when I participated in 2013, as many of you probably did, in the National Settlement Conference. I remember there was a panel about multi-stakeholder partnerships, and somebody who I admire, really respect and admire a lot, was telling us just how much partnerships are fun. She's really selling the concept. Unfortunately, that's not what I'm here to tell you. Now the organizing committee is probably wondering why on earth they thought it would be a good idea to put me up here. Sure, partnerships can be fun. They can be very rewarding, very useful. But in my experience, and I'm sure most of you will agree with this as well, they can be incredibly complex, challenging. They require significant investment in time and energy, sometimes several overtime hours as well. And sometimes, if the right conditions aren't there, they just don't work. Surprise, you wanted to hear promising practices. So to start off with a little bit of background, because I'm sure it's not everyone in the room who's really familiar with Francophone immigration partnerships, I'll do this briefly. But before I speak to the specific question of implementation, coordination, and alignment of activities, just some kind of historical background. So for Francophone communities, and I'm speaking specifically outside of Quebec, that's my organization's mandate, Francophone immigration is a key issue and priority in terms of demographic growth, in terms of a tool for development, as well as the reality we have newcomers in our communities, so the aspect of diversity and inclusion within French-speaking communities outside of Quebec. We have specific goals that weren't supposed to be long-term goals. They were supposed to be short-term goals to achieve 4% of all immigrants that come outside of Quebec should be French-speaking. Why do we say this? To maintain the very minimal level of demographic. Before we even speak of growth, just maintain the demographic weight, if you will. The reality is that for years, you see the percentages on the screen here. For the people at the back, we're talking about 98% of non-French-speaking immigrants that come to Canada every year, and less than 2% of French-speaking, so Francophone immigrants here. So there are, let's say over the past 15 years, some significant efforts that have been undertaken to foster collaboration, awareness, collaboration between community partners, so we can think of, just any type of Francophone immigration, also a Francophone organization, Francophone service providers, so organizations that have a specific mandate related to serving and supporting newcomers. We're talking about government partners. We're also talking about researchers. So my organization is also a partner of P2P and very happy to be. So more specifically, what do some of these multi-stakeholder immigration partnerships look like within our communities? At the national level, and since 2002, there is a joint committee between CIC and Francophone minority communities. Used to be a steering committee. In 2013, we simplified the structure. There are also 13 Francophone immigration networks across the country, generally structured at a provincial or territorial scale. And Vicki mentioned this earlier. The RIFs, as we often call them in English, somewhat similar to a LIP structure partnership, with, of course, some differences specifically related to geographical scope and also the specific Francophone mandate here. Since 2013, I had the pleasure of creating this committee. I also coordinated a national community table on Francophone immigration. And since 2014, an interdepartmental working group that focuses on identifying labor market needs and employer engagement. So as Chris mentioned, we had some very specific questions that were sent to us. One of these questions was who takes the lead in these types of partnerships. Sometimes it can be an informal lead based on who's willing to take that lead. But when we look at the partnerships within Francophone minority communities, there are specific coordinators responsible for RIF coordination, ensuring Okay, first of all, before I go on, I am Anglophone. I grew up in northern BC. I work pretty well entirely in French. My partner is Francophone from Quebec, so at home we speak French. So if I'm searching for some words in English, it's not that I don't know the language, it's just I'm really not used to using it in a professional context like this, so bear with me. So generally, the RIF coordinators are also employees of the provincial territorial Francophone associations. That's the case for 9 out of the 13 RIFs across the country. So direct links to the main organizations that represent Francophones outside of Quebec. At a national level, whether we're talking about the National Community Table, the joint committee between CIC and Francophone minority communities, and also offering support at a national level to all RIF coordinators and RIFs. This role is filled by my organization. Also, CIC has a joint role with us in terms of coordinating the joint committee. The working group I mentioned focused on identifying labor market needs, employer engagement, as well as obviously several FedProv tables, etc. So when we talk about implementation strategies, and I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker because I know we're tight for time today, here are some strategies. I'll just throw them out there that are used both at a national level and for RIFs, for implementing different types of activities, their strategic plans and whatnot. One strategy often used to avoid diffusion of responsibility is delegating specific lead partners or organizations depending on the priorities or action items. Some have recently developed reporting templates for all partners. So before we get together for maybe our annual, semi-annual meeting, we're asking partners to provide some feedback on what they have done. Many have also established working groups, sector committees, or ad hoc committees depending on specific issues or initiatives. Last point here, identifying short-term goals and developing operational plans to ensure implementation of strategic objectives. So strategic plans, strategic objectives are often very high level. So in an effort to kind of bring this down to something more concrete, more short-term, this is one of the strategies currently used. Here's just very quickly to give you an idea of the different types of committees that have been put in place for different RIFs. Promotion and recruitment, settlement, resettlement, different types of integration. Sometimes they're not specifically focused on newcomers, but they're looking with educational partners, how can we adapt services to the needs of newcomers, or in terms of justice, health, or healthcare. I will, before I get into the challenges, just mention quickly a few success stories here, if you will. National Francophone Immigration Week. If you want more information, I'd invite you to check out our website or to check out the latest P2P newsletter. This was started as a pilot project in the Atlantic provinces in 2012 and developed at the national level, so across the country outside of Quebec, in 2013. This year, first week of November, we'll be celebrating the 3rd annual National Francophone Immigration Week. Why I talk about this as a success story is partly because these specific initiatives provide opportunities to engage new partners, because it's a concrete, specific, timely event. People are more willing to invest and engage in those activities. And last year, looking at some results, there were over 100 events across the country focused on Francophone immigration, and those took place thanks to the participation of approximately the same number of partners, so approximately 100 partners across the country. Another example often mentioned in RIF annual reports to CIC of promising practices or successful initiatives are the liaison tours we coordinate across the country to inform and engage employers about recruitment of Francophone immigration. Again, large number of partners. These initiatives are often the opportunity as well to develop what we call strategic partnerships. So often partnerships not just within the Francophone communities, but perhaps with chambers of commerce, with economic partners or employers. Now some of the challenges. I've been working in my position for about 2.5 years now, and something that still surprises me is when people talk about the Francophone immigration networks outside of Quebec, the RIFs, they make a clear association between RIF, which is by definition a network, a partnership, and the one person coordinating that partnership. No distinction. I'll be developing on that on my next slide. Other challenges, maintaining momentum and ownership following the strategic planning phases to ensure implementation of initiatives and plans, as well as evaluate results. And that can't be done without the specific engagement and collaboration of all partners. Soliciting active engagement from all partners, including contributions to the partnership as a whole, and within their respective individual organizations, mandates, and activities. Now, it may sound incredibly critical, but this is because we're also doing currently at the FCFA a significant analysis of these governance structures and how they're working, mainly because our goal is to improve them, strengthen them, support our networks, and achieve the results that we've identified. What we're seeing currently, unfortunately, is often lack of alignment within mandates of individual organizations, lack of information sharing, which obviously contributes to a lot of challenges in terms of really ensuring a clear, consistent coordination of services. And if within Francophone communities or within different types of partnerships, we don't have a clear idea of what this coordination and complementarité, how these are not. Now it's all the French words that are coming to mind. But, we don't want to double over on our efforts. If we can't have a clear idea of that, then imagine the newcomers who are trying to access those different types of networks as well. We've seen also, time and time again, individual partners acting without consideration for the partnerships as a whole. That's a problem. And also weakened partnerships resulting from funding decisions that do not take into account existing structures and services. Sometimes there are Francophone services already funded by provincial governments. CIC comes in. No offense if there are any people from CIC in the room. And all of a sudden offers a new funding to another organization. What does that do? Well, the province often wants to pull out the existing funding. So some key questions. I'll conclude with this, but these are questions that we are looking at, and we're developing currently with various partners a new national framework for community governments and Francophone immigration. And these are some of the questions that we're looking at, hoping to answer. Hopefully some of you in the room can help us with this. How do we overcome competition between partners to achieve truly concerted coordinated efforts within Francophone multi-stakeholder partnerships? How should the role of government partners be defined within multi-stakeholder partnerships? I mention this because at a RIF level, there are often numerous representatives from either federal government departments or provincial territorial governments who participate in an observer capacity. There's always the issue that they're also generally the main funding agencies for the partnerships. At a national level, we have a joint committee. But the other question I'll throw in here that I didn't include on my slide is really when you're working in joint committees, when you're working with government, who's actually determining the priorities of the partnership? Are these priorities that are directly linked to policy decisions? So are they government decisions, priorities? Are they really community or partnership decisions, but priorities? Are they depending on what the funding guidelines are? Or sometimes, and this is something we've noticed recently, are these the orientations given by specific consultants who are supporting the partnerships to develop these strategic plans. A few more questions. Who gets to take credit for the partnership's results and success? Who should be held responsible? Mayor talked about accountability earlier, and that really resonated with me. That's one of the big issues we have now, defining roles and responsibilities of each of the partners, not just the responsibilities of the coordinators, for instance. Last question, I'll leave you with this. And this is a bit of a pitch for the next P2P workshop in Toronto at the end of November. Could better performance measurement tools and strategies, particularly for indirect services and partnerships, improve implementation, coordination, and alignment of activities? Not sure how my time is, but I'll leave you with that.